Estadio Azteca sits over 7,300 feet above sea level. Up there, the air holds roughly 23% less oxygen than at sea level. For the elite European players entering this environment, their bodies are about to experience a severe atmospheric shock. It does not matter how many miles a midfielder covers in the Premier League. Up here, their elite sea-level fitness offers absolutely zero protection against the sudden, violent onset of extreme fatigue. We are going to break down how this oxygen deficit physically breaks modern European pressing schemes, look at the biological data that makes Mexico's preparation impossible to replicate, and run the historical numbers that prove this dominance. If you want more data-driven breakdowns on the mechanics of world football, hit subscribe and ring the bell. The World Cup in Mexico City forces a shift in mechanics, where thin air neutralizes the standard European tactical playbook. Modern European football relies on an aggressive, wide, high-line press. It requires constant sprinting. The Mexican squad, anticipating the environment, uses a more compact, energy-conserving defensive shape that demands far fewer high-intensity runs. This creates what sports scientists call the recovery gap. A European team might look dominant in the opening minutes, running on adrenaline and sea-level stamina, but the moment a player executes a 40-yard transition sprint, their body realizes it cannot recover the oxygen it just burned. This is a tactical pitch map comparing the two styles. Watch what happens around minute 60. The high-pressing team on the left attempts to maintain width, but the exhausted midfield stops tracking back, completely disconnecting from the defensive line. Once that press is bypassed, the defense is completely exposed. Center backs are forced into emergency sprints to cover the open space, pushing their heart rates into the red and exponentially worsening their own oxygen debt. High altitude actively turns the standard European tactical playbook into a physical trap. To understand why this happens, look at the sports science data on extreme altitude. The lower atmospheric pressure means that with every single breath, less oxygen physically enters the bloodstream. This is a heart rate visualization of an athlete at 7,300 feet. At a standard jogging pace, their resting heart rate is already elevated. But ask them to perform a short, high-intensity sprint, and the pulse line spikes straight into the red zone. Notice the failure to recover. The line stays elevated. The athlete physically loses the aerobic capacity required to sustain the rapid changes of pace that define international football. Up here, the athlete's body penalizes them every time they choose to run. Looking at these numbers, drop a comment below. Which high-pressing European squad do you think will gas out first in the group stages? Willpower cannot override a lack of oxygen to the muscles. You cannot out-train the laws of physics inside a 90-minute window. To actually perform in thin air, sports scientists demand 10 to 14 days of dedicated, continuous high-altitude exposure. The World Cup calendar makes that mathematically impossible for most. Group stage matches are scheduled mere days apart, keeping teams in a constant state of travel. Recognizing this, teams like South Africa and South Korea have structured specialized multi-week base camps at extreme altitudes in Pachuca and Utah. They are taking on immense logistical sacrifices just to adapt. Then you have Czechia. They are stationed near Dallas at an elevation of roughly 590 feet. On June 24th, they fly directly into the thin air of Mexico City for a high-stakes group finale, stepping onto the pitch completely blind to the atmospheric toll. The logistics of a month-long tournament actively punish squads that lack the time or resources to set up specialized high-altitude camps. It creates a massive structural mismatch before the whistle even blows. We can see the exact result of this mismatch in the historical data surrounding Estadio Azteca. With the stadium sitting over 7,300 feet up, the physical constraints are measurable. The reduced air density allows the ball to travel faster and further with less resistance, while the heart must work significantly harder to maintain a standard pace than it would at sea level. When Mexico last hosted the World Cup in 1986, El Tri leveraged this exact atmospheric advantage to reach the quarterfinals, their deepest run in history, while forcing an elite West German team to the absolute physical limit. The height disparity alone creates a unique home field advantage that sea-level squads have historically failed to overcome. Consider the disparity between host cities. While players in Toronto compete at just 249 feet above sea level, Those in Mexico City face a gap of over 7,000 feet in elevation. Because of the massive oxygen deficit, sports scientists equate a standard 90-minute match in this specific stadium to the physiological toll of a brutal 120-minute extra-time match played anywhere else. El Tri knows this. They are actively weaponizing the atmosphere, using the thin air as a 12th defender on the pitch. Unless European teams find a way to replicate the intensive adaptation of South Africa's high-altitude camp, the environment itself may dictate the fate of the tournament.